Okay, now I'm at Duxter's, and so I've just typed in what important civil events took place in Alabama during the civil rights eras, the 1950s and 60s. You can research this on Duxter's, Kids Search, or your textbook. All right, so Civil Rights for Kids, Birmingham Campaign, Civil Rights for Kids, Timeline of American Civil Rights. That's where we want to look at. Okay, right here, the 1950s and 60s. We start here at the Supreme Court. All right. Supreme Court rules that segregation in the schools is unconstitutional in the Brown versus Board of Education case, overturning Plessy versus Ferguson. 1955, Rosa Parks is arrested for not giving up her seat on the bus. This sparks the Montgomery bus boycott, which lasts for over a year. (1957) 9 African-American students in Arkansas, nicknamed the Arkansas Nine, attended a previously all-white school. Army troops were brought in to protect them. 1961, the Freedom Riders protest by riding buses into the segregated southern states, challenging their Jim Crow laws. 63, the Birmingham Campaign takes place in Birmingham, Alabama. School children marching in nonviolent protests are met with police dogs and fire hoses. Martin Luther King Jr. is arrested and writes his famous letter from Birmingham jail. 1963, the March on Washington by over 200,000 protesters occurs. Martin Luther King Jr. gives his I Have a Dream speech. 64, civil rights is signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson. It outlaws discrimination based on race, national origin, and gender. It outlaws segregation and Jim Crow laws. 64, Martin Luther King Jr. is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. 65, marchers in Selma, Alabama are met by police with tear gas. Several marchers are injured, and the day is nicknamed Bloody Sunday. 65, the Voting Rights Act is signed into law, making it illegal to prevent any citizen from voting regardless of race. Again in 65, race riots erupt in Watts, California. 65, President Lyndon Johnson issues an order requiring affirmative action and hiring minorities for federal government work. In 67, Thurgood Marshall becomes the first African-American Supreme Court justice. 68, Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. All right, so there you go from 50s to the 60s. This is just it hits the high points of the timeline of things that happened. And so if you go back over and we look at number 6, B, what important civil rights events took place elsewhere but had a big impact on Alabama, this answers A and B. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to find out which one of these events that happened, NAACP, Jackie Robinson, Supreme Court rule, any of these from the 40s, 50s, or 60s, any of these events that sparks your interest. What you're going to do is see who played a key role in these events. So let's say I want to look at 1961, the Freedom Riders protest by riding buses into the segregated southern states, challenging their Jim Crow laws. Okay? Well, first of all, I want to save this page, and how I save it is going to be different than how you save it, okay? I'm going to save it to my bookmarks page because I'm going to want to come back to this later. So I'm going to find my bookmark. Oops, I can't find it right now. Another thing that you could do is to save your notes. You can make a Google Doc. Now, you can make a Google Doc, or you can make or you can have just a plain white piece of paper, plain notebook piece of paper, and keep your notes. Either one's fine. And I'm going to name it so that I don't forget. we're to come back to tomorrow. Okay, so all right, so I'm going to put down, let's see, I said the Freedom Riders. So, all right, so 1961. (1961) Freedom Riders. Okay, so I've got that started, Freedom Riders protest. Okay, and so I'm going to pull up Duxter's again on this side. And when you're doing research and doing things for my class, it's best, or anything online, it's always best to have a split screen. So I'm going to go back to Duxter's. Duxters.com. Okay, and then I'm going to type in, search Duxters, I'm going to type in Freedom Riders. (1961). Search Duxters. All right. We just looked at the timeline. Civil rights for kids, civil rights movement, including segregation. Okay, let's look here and see if we see anything. Civil rights movement. I'm gonna scan through and see if I see Freedom Riders, if it jumps out at me. I'm looking at the words in blue. Early protests, black people join NAACP, Supreme Court, major events, bus boycott. What I'm doing now is I'm not reading every word. I'm just going through and I'm looking at the topics, major events and movement, and then I'm just kind of scanning through. That means I'm just kind of looking through, looking for words to see if Freedom Riders jumps out at me. Interesting facts. Okay, Freedom Riders. Now I'm just going to type in Freedom Riders without 1961 and see what comes up. All right, here we go. So looks like we have one article, timeline, which is what we just saw. All right, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to pull up kids search. And when I get to kids search, I'm going to type in Freedom Riders again. While that's pulling up, I wanted to show you that if you will look at the top where it says civil, under Monday, at the very, very top where it says Civil Rights Leader Project, everything that you need is going to be in here as far as the links and directions. You'll find it right there in that folder. And thank you for your patience as my iPad is being super slow today. All right, so I'm going to type in Freedom Riders. Okay, and you'll see an attachment here, It's the Civil Rights Leaders Project. I'm on the left-hand side of the screen, so, I'm going to type in Freedom Riders, 1961. Okay, on the left-hand side of the screen, how have civil and human rights leaders brought about change in Alabama? Throughout American history, some people were not content to sit back and wait for government to correct inequalities in our society. Citizens of Alabama have benefited greatly from the efforts of civil and human rights activists, even if their work was done in another state. Imagine how different our society would be if our society would have turned out without these leaders. Process. You will work individually. You will research someone who contributed to civil or human rights, identify character traits and results they helped achieve, create a pennant, and add it to a classroom display, discuss, reflect on, and evaluate your learning experiences. Things to research. What important civil or human rights events took place in Alabama? What important civil or human rights events took place elsewhere that had a big impact on Alabama? Who played a key role in these events? Whom do you choose to recognize? How are they affected by lack of rights, and why did they choose to get involved? What was their goal? What actions did they take? What barriers or resistance did they face? What were the results of their actions? Use your research to determine, why did this person choose to act? 2, how did their actions impact people's lives in Alabama? 3, what character traits are evident in their actions and beliefs? And how to present your findings. This is what your final project is going to look like. One of the 3 things across the bottom. Cut a pennant 8 to 9 inches long from a colored piece of construction paper. In bold letters on one side, write the name of the person you choose to recognize. Add character traits you identify with from their actions to help bring about civil or human rights. On the other side, add details to explain when and how they helped bring about their change. Their goals and strategies they used to bring about change, sit-ins, protests, and speeches. Present your pennant to the class with a short speech in which you tell about the person you selected, including how the leader influenced rights in Alabama. After each student presents their person, attach all of the pennants on a long piece of string. We won't be able to do that in class, but we'll do it virtually. I put everybody's work virtually online for you to see it. So you don't have to worry about doing these on your own. I'm going to step you through each step of the process. Don't worry about making the booklet today or the pennant today. You got to do your research first, okay? So now let's look over here. These are our choices that we found, and notice I typed in specifically Freedom Riders 1961. Also, make sure it's spelled correctly, okay? The Freedom Riders facts timeline significant in history. Okay, Freedom Riders. John Lewis. Okay, so we have that, and I'm going to look at my next one. Freedom Riders History and Facts. Okay. U.S. history, a series of political protests. So I'm looking for key people. So I just saw John Lewis. All right. Congress of Racial Equality, Reconciliation, New Orleans, Constitutional Rights, Freedom Riders Encountered Violence in Southern Carolina. See, this, the Freedom Riders, this didn't happen in Alabama, but it happened elsewhere, but it did impact. And if you will look, that was one of the things that we had to look and see, what important civil or human rights events took place elsewhere, but had a big impact. So, nonviolent, National Guard. Okay, so, and then the next one that I saw, I'm going to look for the third one, Freedom Riders Facts. A group of American civil rights activists who rode the interstate buses. So I'm looking for key people. I'm looking to see what happened first, and then I'm looking for key people. A group of American civil rights activists who rode interstate buses in 61 across the southern states in defiance of Jim Crow laws. Although segregated seating was illegal in the interstate buses, such as Greyhound and Trailways, Supreme Court rulings, the practice was continued to be carried out. Okay, let's look here at interesting facts. The idea of freedom rides core President James Farmer. After the initial freedom rides, most of the subsequent rides took place in Mississippi. Most were done by nearly an equal number of white and black freedom riders. I like that, white and black freedom riders. So I know that I'm going to choose somebody within the freedom riders. That's what I'm going to focus on. Although President John Kennedy was sympathetic to some aspects of the civil rights movement, he was highly critical of the freedom riders because he thought they made the United States look bad in the eyes of the world. Soviet Union, rider violence in Alabama. Freedom riders were often arrested, not given bail. The precursor to the freedom rides was 1947 Journey of Reconciliation. Okay. All right, so this helped me decide that I know that I want to focus on the freedom riders. Now I want to go back up and see timeline and significance. Freedom riders, a group of white and African Americans. Bus trips, whites only. Okay. 1961, Jim Crow South. John Lewis. Okay, John Lewis is the original group of 13 freedom riders, 7 African Americans and 6 whites, left Washington, D.C. on a Greyhound bus. May 4th, 1961. Their plan was to research New Orleans, Louisiana on May 17th to commemorate the 7th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education. All right, my person is going to be John Lewis. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pull up my Google Doc. Okay, and I'm going to type in John Lewis. Okay, all right, and then the next question that we have to answer for today is all right, so what important civil rights took place elsewhere but had a big impact on Alabama? The Freedom Riders. And who played a key role in these events? John Lewis. He was one of 7 black and 6 white people. All right, so in the space below, what you'll do is, it says, tell me who your civil rights leader is. Well, that's John Lewis. All right. B. What important civil rights events took place elsewhere but had a big impact? What important civil rights events took place in Alabama during the civil rights era? John Lewis. I'm going to type in Freedom Riders. Okay, B. What important civil rights event took place elsewhere but had a big impact? And then C, who played a key role in these events? So what I would want to do is, I would want to see who else besides John Lewis played a role in this, okay? This is all you have to do for today.